Hi, my name's Damien. This is Enneagram Life. Today I'm talking about Enneagram Type 9. So I had a conversation with an Enneagram Type 9 last Friday, and during this conversation he exhibited some really Enneagram Type 9 traits. So I'm just going to go over some of that. Anyway, we work in Thailand, me and him, and I've gotten to know him. Normally, he is very sort of overly nice and polite. Saccharine is a good word. That's when someone's like sickly sweet. It's that kind of thing. It's this over polite thing that's it's coming from this place of just not wanting to be involved in anything offensive, like not wanting to create any waves, not wanting to start in anything, just like trying to be 100% sure that everyone's okay with him type of thing. So he does that normally. So normally he's this like overly polite, super nice. But then the other thing he'll be is just really angry. Like really angry, like furious anger. And so normally when he is this super angry, it's about, he'll be talking about a story from his past. I'm just looking around for my, Thailand sweat. Anyway, it'll be normally when he's super angry, he'll be telling a story about something he's pissed off with in the past. A past employer or something like that. And so you get that super nice, overly politeness combined with super angriness. That's what you get from him. They're the two colors you see. So it's a jump from extremes. Though notably, when he's super angry, I've never seen him super angry at like a person that's right there. It's always someone from the past or describing a situation, or if it's not a person, it's a circumstance that he's angry with, and the circumstance doesn't relate to. The anger is not directed at any individual that's there. And so, I think that's about the fact that he wouldn't let it go, that sort of anger, because it's an uncontrolled anger, right? It's disproportional because it spikes so quickly. Like here he is being nice and polite, and then all of a sudden he'll start talking about this thing that pisses him off, and he just goes from 0 to 100 in like a tiny amount of time. And so if you were to do that with a person, it would be highly aggressive behavior. That enormous spike, that enormous change in mood, right? Like to suddenly be aggressive towards someone, at that level of aggression towards a person that's actually there would be very serious. Like probably lead to a fight or something, right? So I haven't ever seen him behave like that. Anyway, so last Friday, he started getting super angry, like the angriest I've ever seen him. And that was with himself. He was really like probably literally fuming at the mouth, like spit, accumulating kind of anger, that super caustic anger, that super sort of jaw clenched down, sort of hardcore anger, like very unsettling it was to listen to be there, and just part of your mind is just wondering, is this directed at you? Just because it's so extreme, right? And it wasn't directed at me. I was just the guy he happened to be talking to when he was in this state. And so he was talking about himself, and he was directing anger at himself, and he was super angry with himself for very 9 issues. Okay, so these are the main things I wanted to talk about. So one of the first things he started to get really angry about was saying how he was complaining about how, and saying he'll never do it again, and complaining about how in the past he had waited for women to come back to him. And yeah, he was just saying he'll never do that again. And so this is a very 9 problem. Like, not specifically, like the specific problem is waiting for women to come back to him. And he reckons that's a bad thing to do, and he wished he hadn't done it, and he's never going to do it again. So that's the actual specific problem, okay? But generally speaking, it's this, the 9 element isn't the general problem. It's the idea of, it's the inactivity. This inactivity is a 9 trait. And so, you know, waiting for someone to come back to you is a very inactive action. Like, if you had a choice of what you're going to do, you know, you're going to move on, you're going to try and win her back, or you're going to wait for her to come back. This is the most inactive of those 3 options that I've mentioned. And obviously there's other options out there, but no matter what option you come up with, probably the most inactive one is to wait for her to come back. And yeah, the inactivity is a very 9 trait. And in particular, in this situation, the way he talked about it, like, it was a very intentional choice to wait, the way he described it. Like, it was a conscious decision that the strategy he was going to take to deal with this situation was to wait. And so that's very 9-ish as well. Like, to make that constant, like, to make that constant, to make it a, you know, conscious decision to wait. Like, we can all choose, like, all types will choose, could choose, and sometimes will choose to do nothing, right? To wait, or whatever the version of doing nothing is in that situation. That's a option that many types will choose, but ones are disproportionately drawn, nines are disproportionately drawn to feeling comfortable with that option. Yeah. So, you know, in that as well, you could look at that as an issue of complacency or inertia, right? Like, that could be why he chose to wait for the women to come back. It could be complacency and inertia. And to some extent it is, or would have been. It would have been complacency and inertia. But from the way he talked about it, it definitely seemed like it wasn't, like, the main reason why he was choosing to wait for these women wasn't complacency and inertia. It was this, that was what he was, it was a conscious decision. That was what he felt the most comfortable with, what he thought the best option was to do, to wait. As if, you know, like, it's like a chosen strategy rather than inertia and complacency. Or at least the main reason for it was a chosen strategy. Conscious choice, yeah. So 9s have that they're drawn to towards that feeling comfortable in doing nothing, like feeling that that's the best option. Prioritizing, I guess, like, they over prioritize doing nothing. And if it's an option in whatever situation. And so another thing he talked about was, he got mega angry about, that's what he did. He wasn't talking, he was getting mega angry. He was getting mega angry too about how saying, you've got to do what you want in life. And he talked about how, you shouldn't sit around and complain about your situation, but do bloody nothing. Yeah. Something like, he said something like, don't bloody sit there and complain about it. Get up and do something about it. And so this guy is probably like in his 60s, which has a bearing on this, right? So like he's a 9 that can look back over most of his life and see these patterns, and he's getting angry with himself for all the years that he spent knowing that he was in a bad situation and and not trying to change it. And he's getting really furious with himself about that. And so that's more complacency that he's complaining about there. And, a lack of drive to get out of a situation that he wasn't happy with. And so he feels really annoyed with himself for that lack of drive to get out of the situation, a bad situation, which is more so inertia and complacency. Whereas before, when I was talking about the waiting for women to come back, that was more like he also regretted doing that, but that was more like just the wrong decision to make, rather than a lack of drive. And so, that's another, it's inaction again, right? Like the choice not to try and get out of the bad situation that he was in. And, he was generally talking about job situations when he was saying, don't let you just sit there and complain about it, get up and do something about it. Like he's talking about being in jobs he didn't like, living in countries he didn't like, generally his situation of being around friends he didn't like, that sort of thing, but not doing anything about it. That's what he was talking about there. So more of a no drive thing, but it's still inactivity. And the first example with the waiting for him to come back, that's the inactivity as well. So it's both inactivity, but just motivated slightly differently. And the different motivations, whether it be like a conscious choice to be inactive, or whether it be the lack of drive, and there he's inactive, both lack of drive and conscious choice, both motivate in activity, but they both result in activity, and they're both type 9 traits. They're both reasons. Type 9 is more than the average Enneagram type likely to consciously choose to be inactive, and they're more than the average Enneagram type more likely to be inactive out of a lack of drive, out of complacency, out of inertia. Yeah. And then he ended up by talking about how he ended up on a positive note, which was him pulling himself out of this fury and this anger. And he said how he was glad to be where he was now in Thailand, and because we teach English at a high school in Thailand, and he was talking about how he was glad to be here in Thailand, and how it was much more interesting than his job back at home, and how boring that was. And he seemed genuinely happy that he was in the situation he was in now. Yeah. Anyway, that's about it. So there's a fair few type 9 traits going on there. Hopefully that's a good example of some Enneagram type 9 behavior.